This is where truth and vulnerability are put on the altar. Fear and failures are celebrated as they should be. And we unapologetically peel back all the layers. Welcome to Bare Naked Radio. It's time to get raw, real, and inspired with your host, Dawn Gluskin.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Bare Naked Radio. I am your host, Dawn Gluskin, and today I am so excited to welcome our guest, Alissa Daire Nelson, an amazing soul who I met a little while back at the New Media Summit in San Diego. And her and I are kindred spirits. We both are all about transparency and vulnerability. And I'm just really looking forward to our conversation today. So say hello, Alissa.
Hey there, Dawn. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited about this conversation. I think this conversation needs to happen daily, like everywhere. It's such an important one.
Yes, me too. I'm right there with you. So if you guys don't know Alissa yet, she is an accomplished success coach, a speaker, and host of the Freaking Awesome Entrepreneur podcast. She's also a published author of the book From Frustrated to Freaking Awesome, 4 Steps to Achieve the Success You're Wired For. And I love people that use the word freaking in all of their branding. It's awesome. She's regularly featured on TV news segments and major blogs and publications and on podcasts from all over the globe. But more than anything else, she's an exceedingly proud wife and mother of 2 who loves helping others discover how to make their businesses and their relationships thrive in harmony. So yay, welcome.
Yay. Yes, that is the ABCs of me right there. That is my heart, what I love to do.
I love it. Yeah. So I like to just jump right in and kind of get into your story so people know kind of who you are and how you ended up here. So, you took the unconventional path. You're a speaker and a coach, and you've got your podcast, and you're doing all these amazing things in the world, which is awesome because you're following your bliss. But at the same time, it's a little crazy, right? Being an entrepreneur and going out on a limb. And so how did you end up here and you're not, just working a 9-to-5 job? Like, how is this your path and what gets you out of bed in the morning?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I at one point, as I transitioned through yet another career, I was like, oh my gosh, have I wasted everything? Have I wasted all of these degrees that I have, et cetera? And the answer is absolutely not, right? Because an education is never wasted. So I'll give sort of the Cliff Notes version is, I grew up trying to achieve the life I was supposed to. I grew up, I was a gymnast growing up. I was a gymnast for 15 years. Division I college athlete. And then I transferred and I transferred again and I got my degree. And I'm, after college, you're supposed to get married. You're supposed to buy a house. You're supposed to have kids. You're supposed to get a job, And I did all those things. So, out of the gate, I was a registered dietitian, married, within 6 months, after I graduated college, because that was what I was supposed to do. Got a job, got the house, all of that good stuff, was really unsettled. And so I thought, well, it's because I need more achievement. I need a different career. And so I went back and with a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old, went back and got a nursing degree. Yeah. And in the midst of my nursing program, my marriage fell apart, which we know doesn't happen like, oh, suddenly my marriage just fell apart. Right. It's been falling apart for years. Let's get real. Yeah. But that's when it all came to a head. So now I'm finishing nursing school with a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. I'm trying
as all sane people do, right?
As all sane people do, and starting into a new career. And oh, by the way, let's just add a separation and an impending divorce on top of all that. And so that moment, right, was really my lowest of lows, where I had to seriously stop and look at, what am I doing? Is this my path? What is the path? Did I just follow this because I was supposed to, or is this really what I want what to do, and went through a lot of soul searching, went through a lot of counseling. If you're going through a divorce, I highly recommend a counselor. And really dove into my own self-development. As a newly single mom, I was terrified about the idea of being the only one putting a roof over my kids' heads. And that's what got me into entrepreneurship. Is I started a side business and fell in love with entrepreneurship and didn't want to, as many women do. I started that first business was in direct sales. And so I was like, well, if I'm going to run a business, I want to run a business. I don't want to run a hobby. I looked around and a lot of the women that were in the company that I was in were running hobbies and they weren't really making a lot of money. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it really well. And so went to every conference I could, read every book I could, started engaging in group coaching and then one-on-one coaching to really develop my business skills and personally as well. And there was this epiphany moment a couple of years into that business where I had already quit my nursing job, this nursing degree that I'd worked so dang hard for.
Yeah.
I quit my nursing job to pursue this business full time. And somebody asked me, and I can even remember exactly where I was sitting. I can remember exactly what I was wearing, the whole thing. It was such a vivid transition moment. And he said to me, Alissa, can you help all of the people that you want to help in the business you're currently in? And despite the fact that I had quit my nursing job and was pursuing this thing full-fledged, like all in, I could not answer yes.
Right.
And I was literally physically ill for 3 days after this conversation because I thought, oh my gosh, what now?
So he saw something in you and that question just triggered this introspection, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it wasn't like I hadn't been introspective, right?
Yeah.
And so I went home and by that point I was now remarried. So I came home and I talked to my husband and I said, what do you think? Because I think that where I need to go is into coaching. That's where I can get my agenda off the table, right? I don't want to recruit anybody into my dream. I wanted to recruit them into their own dream.
Yeah.
And my husband fully agreed. And we kind of took the weekend and sat and simmered on that. And we made that decision together to launch my coaching practice. And so that's, where this business, Dare Success Coaching, really, really launched. So that was a longer Cliff Notes, but that's how I got to where I am. And the journey has been long. It has not been easy, but it has been 100% worth it.
Gosh. And I love your story. There's so many amazing, juicy points in there. And for our listeners at home, I'm sure they can relate to this, having that sort of list of supposed to do's, right? And you're running down the list and checking it off. Okay, got the degree, got the house, got the husband, got the, and then there's still this unsettled feeling. And it's what we talk about often on this show is the number one deathbed regret, which is, I wish I had lived a life true to myself instead of the one that others had wished for me. And we kind of go through life doing that and don't realize it till it's too late on the deathbed. But then some of us are blessed enough to have some sort of trauma or drama or something like the universal 2x4 over the head that snaps us out of it while we're still alive. And that's, we have similar stories in that way, different details. So we're some of the lucky ones that we got our second chance. To live the life we really want.
Well, I'm so glad that you talked about the universe sort of hitting you over the head with a 2x4 because this goes to whether you're going to be a victim of your circumstances or you're going to let your circumstances propel you forward.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite Tony Robbins quotes is that life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you.
Yeah.
But the distinction between the 2 and the 4 is you.
Absolutely.
It's what you decide that you're going to do with it. Like this thing happened, fact. Can't change it.
Yeah.
So what are you going to choose to do with it? And the beautiful thing is that we're not trees, right? We can get up and we can move.
Exactly.
And so we might be a victim of a particular person's behavior or a particular circumstance, right? Like we didn't do it. We didn't cause it. However, great things can come out of any situation, no matter how horrific.
I agree 1,000%. And sometimes when you're in it, so of course, you're going to have that initial shock or like, why me? What did I do to deserve this? Like those human feelings, it hurts, it's painful. It's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? However, like as such a skill, if you can turn around and look at that pain and say, well, okay, what are you trying to tell me? Right? Because it's just information. What am I to learn from this? How can I grow from this? And when you start asking those questions, it can really, like you said, propel you forward. Or it can bury you if you just get caught up in it and victimized in it. It'll take you down, but you can really just propel you. We can turn our pain into purpose.
Yeah. And that's why I think coaching is so important, right? Because no matter, and by the way, if you're hiring a coach, ask them, do you have a coach? Because everybody needs that outside perspective,
that reflection.
No matter how self-aware you are, no matter, how much work you've done personally, you will never have that beautiful outside perspective on what's going on. And so, to have somebody that you trust to pull you by the back of your shirt out of the weeds of your own situation, right? To get this broader perspective and go, oh, this is what's going on. And we teach our kids these things. My daughters, like, okay, if it doesn't matter in 5 years, I can't let it matter in 5 minutes. And I'm like, wow, this is incredible. If I'd only had that perspective when I was 10 or 12, like that's amazing, right? Yep, kiddo, you're absolutely right. So they're teaching themselves, or I'm teaching them, I guess, how to pull themselves out of the weeds of their own situation. Like, is this something that is actually going to matter in 5 years from now? If not, don't let it consume more than 5 minutes of your time. And when we can get that kind of perspective, and usually it does require the help and assistance and perspective of somebody else.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful thing to have somebody that's a reflection back to you, that can reflect your light back, especially when you're in one of those lulls. Like we have ebbs and flows in life. It's a roller coaster. There's ups and there's downs. And when you're in one of those down moments, to have someone like a coach that's got your back and can reflect back to you all those things that are magnificent about yourself, because there's a way of us humans being when something bad happens. For me, it was, I had a $3 million company and I lost it all. And we ended up having to shut the doors and all of that. And like, when that happened, my memory was wiped. Like everything that happened before that time, like didn't occur. So like you're saying, a coach is going to remind you of who you really are and all the wonderful things you have accomplished.
Amen.
So that blip on the radar is just part of your journey. So take us back. You had mentioned one of the biggest kind of growth opportunities in your life was that time when you were going through your divorce, and it really forced you to look at who you were. And out of that, you said you fell in love with yourself, which I think is so beautiful. But how did you navigate it? So for any of our listeners who are going through relationship issues, or maybe it's, their business is up and down, or they're going through one of the struggles of life, an illness, it could be anything. How do you get yourself out of that when it just feels like such despair? Like, how do you turn it in to propelling you forward? What are some of your tips or ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I can actually feel the heaviness in my heart, kind of putting myself back in that moment. And there was a low of the lowest, right? And I share this story not because the behavior was okay, but specifically because the behavior was not okay. And I lived in silence and shame of this for years. And it's only been in the last 6 months or so, literally, that I have even been able to share it because of the fear of judgment, because of my own shame surrounding it. But at one point, and this was while I was still in nursing school, going through the throes of being separated from my husband and, these 2 small children. And, I was medicating with alcohol. And I went out with some friends, and I woke up in my driver's seat with the seat reclined, parked outside of my house.
Oh, wow.
At 4:00 in the morning.
Yikes. Yeah.
And by the grace of God, I didn't kill anybody on my way home. By the grace of God, I didn't kill myself and leave my children motherless. But talk about the lowest of the lows, right? And even at 4 a.m. and, here in Minnesota, the bars close around, 1:30 or 2. And so this was several, a couple hours post last drink. I mean, this was not a pretty sight. And I was still so drunk that I stumbled into the house. I couldn't even walk straight. Like, talk about the most shameful thing that you could possibly fathom. Right. And I said, something has to give. Like, this is not okay.
Yeah.
And the truth be told, I was not an alcoholic. Thank goodness that I wasn't, that it wasn't an addiction. But what I was doing was I was medicating with alcohol. And I said to my husband at the time, that we were, trying to work things out and whatnot. I said, I need to go to counseling because this is not okay. There's something severely wrong that I chose that behavior. And
I almost feel like you had a guardian angel too that was there to protect you and make sure you were okay and that nothing horrible happened, and to wake you up. Like, this is not okay. Like, that was your wake up with the 2x4.
Yes, the 2x4. And whether you've experienced something that is that horrific where you could have damaged, like, I mean, I just, even still, and this is a decade later, I shudder to think of what could have happened in that moment. And do I think drinking and driving is okay? Absolutely not. Like, that wasn't a part of my belief framework. Like, it wasn't, and yet I did something that was so counter to my values, so counter to everything that I believed. And I did that thing. Like, oh my goodness. And so my husband at the time said, "Oh, you're fine. Everyone has a rough night." I was like, and it was that moment where I was like, this is not working.
Okay. Yeah.
This is not working. And so I dove wholeheartedly into being the best version of myself. And it was my counselor actually who I started seeing thereafter, who said, I was like, have I screwed up my kids' lives? Like, what's going on? And she said, no, you need to be the best version of you. Your kids don't need counseling. Your kids don't need anything else except for you to be your best you. Yeah. And so that's what I had to work on. And it was that moment and that experience where I really understood putting the oxygen mask on your own face before you can serve anybody else. And, I was trying to do all the right things, right? But I was serving from an empty cup. I was emotionally and spiritually completely empty. And when you're in that situation, right? When you're in that state, you do things that are outside of your character, that are misaligned. And so I had to get right with myself. I had to get right with my own emotions and fill that cup back up so that I could be the best mom. That was the first and foremost, was I have to be a good mom to these girls. And so I had to define, what is a good mom? What does that even look like? What does an empowering mom look like? So it was all of this journey. And so, through 10 years of this, and my journey is not over. I'm still growing, right? So I've not arrived, and I will never arrive, because I will continue to grow and grow and grow. But that heaviness of this is all misaligned. And the recognition that it's not aligned was the thing that compelled me into figuring out, well, if this isn't right and I don't want to be living this way, what is right for me? And that answer isn't a simple one, right?
Yeah, that's a great place
to be
in that introspection place. It's such a powerful place to be. And I want to say, just, first of all, thank you for sharing that, because it's not easy, right? When there's something in our past or something that carries that heavy weight of shame, or we're blaming ourselves. It's really, sometimes it's hard to be vulnerable and open, because it's like, ooh, even though that's my past, are people going to judge me? But I just honor that and respect that so much, because I know that how that works is other people are listening. They're going to see themselves in your story, maybe not in the driver's seat of the car, but some version of that, where they are having a human experience and there's so much pain and suffering in their life that they're just trying to get through, right? We can all relate to that at some point. We've had our own version of that. And you had that, it was your wake up call. So maybe someone else that's listening can see themselves in that, and they're like, you know what? That I can do better with my life, and have their wake up call. So we don't always have to have the 2x4 over the head moment. And that's what this show is about, is sharing our stories, sharing behind the scenes, so that we can all feel connected and what it's like to be human and feel empowered
Yeah, that's right. And identify what is your rock bottom.
Yeah.
Some people have a shallow rock bottom, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
Great. And my rock bottom wasn't nearly as low as what somebody else, other people might need to feel their rock bottom. We're like, oh, this is the lowest that I am willing to go. And I'm going to turn this around. And, so you have to decide, as you're listening, what is your rock bottom? What are you willing to accept as your rock bottom? Because I could have accepted what my husband then said, which was, I'm fine. I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Normal,
I just had a bad night.
Right.
I'm not an addict. I'm fine. Everything's fine. It's fine. And continued on. But that for me was my rock bottom. So I think the important thing too is to discover, what are you willing? What suffering are you willing to go through before you've had enough?
Yeah. And there's some level of self-awareness there too, because like you said, that was so out of alignment for you and your morals and what you stand for. And it just felt so misaligned that you had no other choice, is what I'm hearing, but to really just go inside and say, what is this about? How do I move past this? And, it's just really tuning in with yourself and developing that self-awareness and asking the hard questions, right? Because you could have just drank more alcohol and let me just numb the pain, and then more shame, more pain. And it would have, escalated from there. But to sit with that pain and ask it, like, what is this about? What are you trying to tell me? What's my next step? There's so much power in that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And something else that I loved you in your story, when you were talking about when you did decide to be an entrepreneur, and there was something in there about you just decided that you're going to do it well. And that was just how it's going to be. And I think that's important for people to hear too. If you are going down that path of creating your own reality, of whether it's entrepreneurship or whatever in your life, you just have to decide, like, this is how it's going to be. There's no other option. And that's how I see the most successful people is like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. And then it just goes from there, and you keep following the breadcrumbs, because at first it was the multi-level marketing or the network marketing. And then you were like, know what, there's something more. You had the person ask you that questions that sent you on more introspection. And that's kind of how it works. When you're in motion, these breadcrumbs just keep showing up, and you follow the breadcrumbs, and it leads you down to the path if you're tuning in. Yeah.
And I want to say one more thing about the deciding thing is that just because you've decided that you're going to be successful, or you're going to follow this path, or you're going to do whatever, it doesn't mean that suddenly it's going to, show up right the next day.
Right. That's just the first step.
And I don't even remember who the quote is from. I'm sure 1,000 people have said it, but basically here's, are you interested in your goals, or are you committed to them? Because if you're committed to them, then, every scraped knee that you have, every, pothole you fall in, you're going to be willing to get up and move forward.
Yeah.
But if you're just interested in your goals, whatever those goals might be, it's going to be super easy to derail that. Like, oh, you know what? I need to go put a Band-Aid on my knee now, and I'm done. Like, I'm going to get off the gravel road here.
It's too hard.
It's too hard, and that kind of thing.
Or
so
that didn't work.
Really committed to. Right. Yes, exactly. And that's what the deciding is. It's not that you decide and then suddenly it just, all of a sudden lands in your lap. It doesn't work that way. But what it does is it allows you to get through those essential obstacles. And there's a reason that people when they're receiving their gold at the Olympics, there's a reason they're sobbing. It's because the level of achievement is equal to the level of sacrifice, dedication, hard work, obstacles overcome on the way there. If it was easy, the achievement wouldn't be there. Right? So by virtue of the of achievement as a definition, it has to have some challenges. No, that doesn't mean you have to suffer, but there will be challenges. If it is a goal that is actually worth your time and energy and effort, there will be challenges along the way. And those challenges make you stronger. And so, think of whatever your goal is as your Olympic medal moment. You're going to be so happy and proud of yourself that you stayed the course, because so many people do not stay the course. And that is exactly why it's an achievement.
I love that. It's a beautiful analogy on the Olympic. And you're so right, because there's power in deciding, but you have to decide that you want it so badly that whatever happens, as to your point, you're going to keep going.
That's right.
Deal with whatever struggle, you're just going to keep going. You're going to pick yourself up. And some days it's really hard to pick yourself up. Like, we encounter some pretty big obstacles on the way, but if you stay in action and every day you keep picking yourself up and keep moving forward, like that athlete that's committed every single day to waking up at 5 a.m. or whatever it is, and putting in their training time and eat, like all of that. If you treat your business like that, or whatever goal, you will get it. Like the whole universe conspires. You might not get the gold, but I mean, you're still going to get where you want to be.
Yeah. Amen.
It's beautiful. And you shared this beautiful metaphor earlier. So on the show, on Bare Naked, we often talk about fears. And I think our fears have so much to tell us. And actually for me, fear is almost like a sign that I'm moving in the right direction. It's like an up leveling. If you can conquer this, you're going to move up the ladder kind of thing. And I always get excited when a fear comes up. And you had said to you that you're not interested in stomping out fear. It has a purpose. And it wants to protect you. So you said if you got rid of fear, it would be the same as like getting rid of our pain sensors or our nerve endings, right? So when you touch that hot stove, you don't feel it, right?
That's right.
So yeah, could you talk a little bit more about that? And what are some of your fears that you're either contending with now, or maybe that you've already overcome?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, my philosophy on fear is that it has something to tell you. So if we were to just simply ignore the fear or move anyway, we may potentially be putting ourselves at unnecessary risk, right?
Yeah.
So let me give you the metaphor of jumping out of an airplane. Okay, like if you've never skydived, I'm not sure what the past tense is.
I'm not sure either.
If you've never done that before, it's scary, right? You're like literally jumping out of a plane.
Yeah.
And, so you did your due diligence, you took the course, you got the training and all of that good stuff, and your heart is still thumping, right? So fear is trying to tell you something. Now, here's the thing. If you just ignore it and you jump out the window or jump out the door, you may, like, oh, I forgot to put my parachute on. Just that one last thing. But if instead you said, hey, fear, how you doing? What do you have to tell me?
Yeah.
Right? And you have a conversation with that fear, right? So now you're not running away from the fear, but you're facing it head on and you're having that conversation. And fear says, oh my God, you could die. You're like, you know what? You're right. If I didn't have a parachute on, but I'm going to put my parachute on and it's secured in place. Oh, but what if you don't pull the cord right? Well, because I know that the checks have been done and right? So you have that conversation to go, do I have the right things in place in order to take this risk in a calculated fashion? Right? Because fear comes up typically when we're taking a risk of some sort. And without taking a risk, you don't progress. So you do have to address this fear. It's not like you just give in to the fears, but if you have a conversation with it, then you can better prepare yourself. Well, I'm afraid to get up on the stage and give this speech. Okay, well, have you written it? Well, no. Oh, well, that would be a good thing to do, right? No wonder you're afraid.
Right. Yes.
So fear has a purpose. And when you have a conversation with it, rather than trying to block it or run, push it aside.
Yeah.
Now you can actually be better prepared, and you can begin to better identify your limiting beliefs. Right? Well, because what if everyone laughs at me? Okay. All right. Thank you, fear, for that. Is that actually going to happen? Well, no, because, these people asked me to come talk because they saw value in my message and they think that value will resonate with their audience. So no, people aren't going to laugh. Okay,
right.
Do you know your content? Yes, I know my content. Do you know what you're going to say? Yeah, I'm really well prepared and I've been practicing. Okay. So is it actually true that people are going to laugh at you from the stage? Oh, no. Okay, that's a limiting belief. You see, so when we begin to embrace that fear for the conversation, rather than try to stamp it out, now we can uncover these limiting beliefs that it's like, oh, that's not a real that's not a real worry. That's not a real concern. It's just my fear.
Yeah.
Right?
And I
It's
love
just
your metaphor too on the plane, because what most people would do is you have two options. Like the fear's coming up, you're about to jump out of the plane. Is option one is to hide in the back corner of the plane and a ball, like you can't make me jump out of that. I'm not doing it, and just run from it. Right. Or like you said, to your point, bypassing it and just be like, I'm going to ignore you, fear. I'm not going to even, I don't want to deal with you. I'm just going to jump out of this door. And that's a little, right. You don't want to do that either, because you might end up splatting on the ground.
We don't want to splat. Splatting is not a good thing.
Splatting is not good. But what people like, they don't ever teach you this in school. And I love that you're teaching it to your children. And I do the same thing, is really those uncomfortable feelings that come up, instead of pushing them down or bypassing them or running from them, is just to sit with them and ask. And I literally do the same thing. I ask the question, like, what are you trying to tell me? And it sounds a little weird at first. It's like, what, you talk to yourself? It's like, well, yeah, I guess you could say it that way, but it's so powerful, because when you ask the question and you sit and listen, you really get something valuable. Have that conversation. It's like, okay, well, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Okay, well, what's the best thing that could happen? And just really kind of rationalizing it, and it helps you work through it, because our fears are trying to keep us safe. And some of the fear is rational and some of it's not, right? Some of it is, crazy. It's like, you're not going to die on a stage when you give a speech, right? Like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But just kind of figuring out, it's like, oh, well, this is important to me and I want to do a good job. It's like, okay, great. So let's prepare for that. So I love that you were also talking to yourself and talking through to your emotions, because it's so powerful, and you could just move through stuff so quick once you get that muscle developed. It's really, really powerful.
Yeah. And also I want to point out, when it comes to talking to yourself, right? We, sometimes we're the meanest, not sometimes, almost always, we're the meanest to ourselves. And when we start to recognize the conversation that we're actually having in our head, like, oh, Alissa, you're fat. Oh, like, why'd you wear that? Or, oh, this is your face is crooked, or, like whatever, right? Whatever
mean stuff that comes out. Yeah.
Things, like, oh, you're so stupid, or you're incapable, or
we're the worst to ourselves. Yeah.
Would I ever speak that way to a 10-year-old girl? Or if you're a man listening, would I ever speak that way to a 10-year-old boy? If the answer is no, then you have to be aware enough to go, you know what? That's not something that I accept as a statement that I'm willing to say to myself anymore. Yeah. So what is a different truth that I can tell myself is that, you know what? Yeah, my face isn't symmetrical, and that's totally okay. That's part of what makes me me. My smile is a little crooked, but you know what? I love my smile, and my smile exudes brightness. So it's okay that it's a little bit crooked. Yeah. Right?
Like that's what you would tell the 10-year-old that came up to you and said that, and empower them. And we can do that to ourselves, and we can really tap into our greatness and our superpowers and our divine gifts when we are that voice.
Totally.
Instead of that big mean voice. I love that you said that. That's so great. That's like just have a vision of a child in your mind, and would I say that to them? Mm-hmm. Well, Alissa, I love this conversation, and we could literally go on for hours. However, it's only a 30-minute show, and it went by so quick.
I know.
But before we exit, I know some people are hearing what you have to say, and they want to know what else is out there and how do they connect with you on social media. And I know you have a gift, so I'm going to let you tell all of our Bare Naked audience how they can connect with you after the show.
Yeah. And, real quickly, I realized that I didn't even answer your question about what fears I have and that I'm going through. And because this show is all about vulnerability, I think it's important for people listening to go, oh my gosh, Alissa's got it all together and she's worked through all this stuff. She's so aware and all of those things. Doesn't mean that my fears don't arise. And so
none of us have it all together, by the way. Nobody. I've never met one that legitimately has it all together.
Part of our progress, right, is identifying those fears earlier and earlier, because it's easier to put out a match than it is to put out a house fire, right? Yeah. So that's my goal, is to always find those fears earlier than later before they're incapacitating me. But a fear that always comes up for me is fear of rejection. It's very important to me that people that that people feel loved in my presence. And when people feel loved, they like you, right?
Yes.
And so if they don't like me, then, oh my gosh. So that fear of rejection is always something that I have to address. And so I do a lot of affirmations and self-talk around that area and recognize those things earlier and earlier so that I can squish those limiting beliefs, right? That have in the past held me back from getting up on the stage, because what if they don't like me, right?
Yeah.
So, these fears don't necessarily go away, but if you can identify them earlier and earlier, you have so much more power. And you're in the driver's seat, right?
Before the house burns down,
before the house burns down, you got it. You got it.
Match out a lot easier.
So I did want to share that I certainly haven't overcome all of my fears.
It's a process. I think
it is a process
for all of us.
100%. But I would love to connect with folks on social media. Certainly, you can find me on Facebook. Dare Success Coaching is my business page. I also have a Facebook community, the Frickin' Awesome Entrepreneur Community. So you can join that group on Twitter and, all of the other Instagram, all the other social medias. But what I would love to give your audience, Dawn, is this e-workbook about the 4 things that really will prove to you in black and white that you are unique and not unique like, oh, that's wonderful, you're unique, you get a consolation prize, but that you are so unique that you have a responsibility to get out there and contribute your uniqueness.
That's why you're here. Yep.
Absolutely. So this e-workbook helps people to work through and get down in black and white so they can actually visually see it, what makes them freaking awesome. And so they can get that e-workbook at daretossucceed.com/bare naked. So it's DAIRE, 2, succeed.com/bare naked. And of course, bear is BARE. You guys know that. daretossucceed.com/bare naked. And that's where they can find that e-workbook.
Oh, I love it. Well, Alissa, you are freaking awesome. And I appreciate you and you're being vulnerable with us today and your light in the world and how you help other people, step into their best life and overcome their fears. So thank you for spending time with us today. And also all of the links and her social media will be on barenaked.radio.com as well. You can just go to her show and connect there as well. So thank you so much, Alissa. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Dawn. You too.
Thank you for listening to Bare Naked Radio. We invite you to join us in the Naked Soul Tribe on Facebook and sound off about this episode. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure you connect with your host at Dawn Gluskin on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All show notes and links are accessible on barenakedradio.com.